news tonight in the frantic search for missing 5-year-old Michigan girl Nevaeh Buchanan. In a stunning and gut-wrenching development, investigators announced they now have count them, two persons of interest in this case. Both are convicted sex offenders. Both are friends with the missing child's mother. 48-year-old Roy Smith is now in custody on suspicion that he violated his parole by allegedly having contact with little Nevaeh. Sex offenders are not supposed to have contact with kids. This new person of interest apparently owns the van driven by the other sex offender and person of interest in this case, George Kennedy. Cops say Kennedy is the boyfriend of the missing girl's mom, although she calls him just a friend. Just a friend. Investigators made an ominous discovery inside that van, a multi-purpose tool covered in blood. They also allegedly found blood spattered around Kennedy's motel room. And there are more horrifying developments. Nevaeh's little playmate, a 6-year-old girl, tells investigators that Nevaeh went to the woods to meet somebody called Daddy George. Another playmate claims he saw her stabbed in the stomach. Could that explain the bloody tool found in the van owned by one person of interest and driven by another? The blood still being tested at this hour. But meantime, gotta say this, cops say George Kennedy reportedly has an alibi, a solid one. Two people say they were with him at the time of this little girl's disappearance. Does that mean he's off the hook? Nevaeh's devastated mom says there is absolutely no way her daughter just wandered off.
I think they put their hand over her mouth, maybe put her in the back, something, I have no idea. And I really don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about the bad. I just want to think about the good.
Should have thought of that before you got involved with all these people. We all hope we will get some good news soon, but these developments are beyond troublesome. Straight to my fantastic expert panel, Lisa Bloom, anchor at the Legal Network in session and CNN legal analyst, Debbie Magid, psychologist, Mark Eiglarsh, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, Mike Gaynor, a former NYPD detective and president of East Coast Detectives, and by phone, Michael Rosenfield, a reporter with WXYZ who's been doing some great work on this case. You've been tracking this case from the start, Michael. What is the very latest?
Yeah, Jane, stunning developments today on several different fronts that you've been mentioning. The main thing, though, this gentleman by the name of Roy Lee Smith, 48 years old, yet another convicted sex offender. Well, now he's in custody on a parole violation, and police are calling him a person of interest in Nevaeh's disappearance. He was picked up on Monday, shortly after Nevaeh disappeared. And also, these two other witness accounts from child witnesses, police aren't sure if these witness statements are credible, but here's what they're saying. One girl, she's 5 years old, says she was playing with Nevaeh on the day she disappeared, and she saw Nevaeh go into the woods. Nevaeh told her she was going to meet, quote, Daddy George. George could likely be, perhaps, George Kennedy, the friend of Nevaeh's mother. And also an 8-year-old boy says he was riding bikes with Nevaeh Sunday afternoon in the parking lot at their apartment complex. He says, quote, Nevaeh went into the woods and was, quote, kidnapped by a bad man. He also reported the bad man stabbed Nevaeh in the stomach with a knife. He says he tried to help the little girl but couldn't and went back home. Later, though, investigators say he was unable to convey clearly that he actually witnessed these events. So they're not sure how credible these statements are, or if there just might have been so much trauma to this boy that he couldn't put the pieces together once again.
Or maybe they were watching the news, and children are impressionable, and often they confuse reality with fantasy. We're going to analyze that in just a moment, Michael. Nevaeh's mom was asked about George Kennedy, the convicted sex offender she befriended, and even allowed her to hang out, allowed her own daughter to hang out with this guy.
Honestly, I really do not see him doing it, but then again, I could be wrong.
How worried does that make you, knowing all those things?
Very worried. It just makes me sick to my stomach. I cannot imagine. He had contact with her before, but I've never left her alone with him. There was always another parent with her and him.
Bad answer. I don't care. It's incomprehensible. I would argue criminal that this mom would let a convicted sex offender anywhere near her daughter in the first place. But Lisa Bloom, look at the mom's own record. The Detroit Free Press says she served 11 months behind bars for a home invasion that was reportedly due to a drug problem, and her own mother is quoted as saying she met George Kennedy at a parole office.
Well, that's going to be my question, Jane. Did she know that he's a convicted sex offender? If not, she's an innocent victim here. I don't care about her criminal history. Her daughter's missing. She's a grieving mother. She's not a suspect in her daughter's disappearance. Did she know that her friend was a sex offender, or was she ignorant to that? In which
Well,
case,
the
I'm not going to blame
sounds like she knows, because she said, I only allowed her to see him with other people present. Why would you do that if you weren't dealing with somebody who had a record?
Well, because I don't leave my kids alone with people who I don't know very well. If they're just a friend, I'm not assuming that they're a convicted sex offender. I mean, I think that's a bit of a leap. Now, if she did know, that's a different subject, but I'm not going to blame her right off the bat. Right now, she's a mother with a missing little girl. I think she deserves some compassion.
Well, let's go back to Michael Rosenfield. What did she know, and when did she know it?
Well, first of all, she definitely knew that he was a sex offender, and she allowed her daughter to hang out with him. Many of her friends and family didn't like it at all. They knew for a while he'd been hanging out with her, and at the apartment they warned her not to get too close, but she did anyway. They said in the end, Jennifer Buchanan is an adult. She can make up her own decisions, and she apparently is hanging out with a couple of sex offenders who, did get to know her daughter very well.
Well, Mike Eiglarsh, it's not just one, it's two guys, and they were both her friends. Now they're both persons of interest.
That's correct. She's off my Mother of the Year list. And Lisa is right. Anyone who loses a child, at least temporarily, we should have certain compassion for them. However, we can also have those same feelings that you have, Jane, my friend with 3 names. You can also have that feeling that, you put your child in harm's way. Whether these guys are responsible or not, you did it. Not a strong choice to put her with guys or a guy that you met at the parole office.
Well, Debbie Maggins, you're the psychologist. This happens all the time, according to prosecutor Stacey Honowitz, a Florida prosecutor, says she sees this all the time, where mothers put their children in danger because they think they're an extraordinary judge of character, or this guy just had a tough break, and they buy a sob story.
Well, this mother definitely has her own psychological issues. I mean, she got attracted to someone with a sex offender history, and she is not acting like a protective mother, and she did put her child in harm's way, and I'm sure she feels very terrible about it now, but one has to wonder about the judgment of this mom.
Yeah, I'm not trying to attack her. I'm saying
Yes.
we have to learn from this case as a society, because this is going on right now all over the country. So at home, if you are a mom or a parent and you have any inkling that anybody that you're hanging out with is a convicted sex offender, press the rewind button.
Don't let them near your children. And this mother had a drug issue to begin with, so she's operating from a place of emptiness inside on her own. So it's really a sad story to me.
But Jane, the other problem is we don't know if either of these sex offenders actually did anything wrong. One of them has 2 alibis. I mean, it's all going to come down to the DNA. If that DNA connects the blood in the van to one of these guys, it's a slam dunk, and the case is over as far as I'm concerned. If there is no DNA match, I mean, the police are still looking. All they have right now is a couple persons of interest, unfortunately.
Well, Mike Gaynor, Lisa's absolutely right. Apparently, this guy you're looking at right here, not that one, but the other one, George Kennedy, that guy has a solid alibi. According to published reports, 2 friends who passed polygraphs said they were with him when the child disappeared.
Well, that's true, but it doesn't mean necessarily that he wasn't involved in some way. But let me address this issue of persons of interest. I want to assure you that the police only have 2 types of persons of interest in a criminal investigation, and those are witnesses and suspects. These guys are suspected to have some kind of an involvement in this case, and their background is the indication for the police to follow up on. If these guys were witnesses, they would have been singing like canaries on day 1. They haven't done that. So they're going to be checked out thoroughly. As Lisa said, the DNA is going to be a substantial part of this case, and any other physical evidence that they may come up with.
Well, let me just say this. Right now, they are not considered suspects. We have to say that for legal reasons. They are just persons of interest, and police say they still hope this child might be alive. Hang tight.
I would disagree with that legal issue.
All right, well, we'll disagree in a moment. Hang tight.
Great.
Fantastic panel. We'll have more expert analysis in just a moment. What is your take on these seismic